Hi, this is Chris Monk at Highline Guitars, and you're watching episode 41 from the Luthier's Workbench. In this episode, I'm going to talk about my workbench. Okay, one of my workbenches. I actually have like 5 different workbenches that I use. But this is the one that is probably the most important. This is my setup table, and it's also where I do all my fret work. So I've talked about some of the features of this table before in other videos. But then in this one, I'm going to kind of bring it all together and show you some recent updates that I've made. And maybe that'll inspire you to build something similar, or maybe even something better. Because you have to remember, when I build these benches, I'm typically just grabbing stuff that I have, laying around the shop, and repurposing it for my workbenches. So let me kind of walk you through it, and let's get started. Okay, so I've already built this bench or table, and I didn't shoot video of the construction process, and really it's pretty basic. I think if you're watching these videos, you could probably do this all yourself. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of back out of it from the top down and kind of show you what I've done. And to start with, I like to use a really soft cushioned surface to place the guitar on. This one's gotten kind of dirty, but what I'm using is it's a really soft towel that I picked up at the dollar store. And I also use, this is kind of funny, this is a mattress protection pad. It's the sort of thing you would put down on a child's bed or an elderly person's bed to protect the mattress from bedwetting accidents. But what I do is I fold it over, lay it down on the table, and then put this soft, it's like a fur-like towel over the top. And underneath it is the workbench itself, or the work table. And I've talked about this before. The table is based on the Dan Erlewine string tension simulating neck jig that you can buy at StewMac. And it's actually based on a version they did many, many years ago. And I copied it based on the measurements of the original jig. And I built it basically out of 2x4s and plywood. And originally it was fitted with a couple of dial indicators so I could simulate string tension. However, I don't really find a use for simulating string tension. I think that simulating string tension is important if you don't have a good feel for doing fret work, or if you're doing repair work on used and vintage guitars where simulating string tension might be critical to getting good playability. I also think it's important if you run a shop where you employ a number of different people who are at different times responsible for doing fret work, and you want to maintain consistency. Having the ability to simulate string tension is good. But I build brand new guitars and I do all the work myself, so I found that simulating string tension with dial indicators was an unnecessary step, and so I just got rid of the 2 dial indicators. Okay, so I've talked about this work table before in previous videos. It's basically just a 2x4. It's about 4 feet long, has a couple of 2x4s at the front and then a couple at the back. And then on the top, I applied a sheet of 3/4 inch thick plywood, which is all attached with wood screws. And then I've got a couple of threaded inserts so I can attach a block of maple that has a couple of wood screws, which will allow me to attach one of my guitar necks, sans the body, so that I can do fret work before installing the neck onto the body. Now, in the past, I had this table sitting on a corner of one of my other workbenches, and that allowed me to kind of work part way around it, but I really wanted to be able to walk all the way around it, without any issues. And that really became a concern when I started doing these multi-scale fan fret guitar necks, because the fan frets force you to work at different angles, and it just is so much more convenient to be able to walk all the way around without being obstructed or blocked by anything. I also wanted it to be much more stable than what I had when it was sitting on the workbench. And what I did was I made a pedestal for it using just junk I had laying around the shop. And what that consists of is a couple of 5-gallon paint buckets. The reason I'm using 2 is because well, they were stuck together and I couldn't get them apart. So, but what I did was I took a 4x4 and placed it in the center and then filled up the bucket with Quickcrete and let it cure for a couple days. Then I attached to the top of the 4x4 it's a 1-inch thick, roughly 5-inch square piece of maple. And then to that, I took this old vise I had sitting in my shop and attached it with 3, I think these are number 12 wood screws. And this allows me to, I can move, in 360 degrees. And then I just take the table and I place that center 2x4 into the vise, tighten it down, and I've got a very simple, very, very sturdy, stable pedestal. In fact, this thing it's very heavy, so heavy, in fact, that it's really impractical to try to lift it and move it around. And for that reason, I'm considering making a rolling dolly with some locking wheels so that I can move it around. But for the time being, I have it in a place where I don't really foresee having to move it. So I'm content with it as is. But all I have to do is take my table, place it into the vise, and then tighten the vise. And this thing is pretty stable. And I can loosen the vise and swivel this around to whatever angle I want it to be at, depending on the layout of my shop. But it's pretty stable. And the critical design consideration for a pedestal like this is the height that it places your work table. I have found through years of doing fretwork on guitars, I like to have the pedestal at roughly waist high, and that will place the guitar at a height that allows me to do the fretwork without having to lean over. Anytime I lean over, it's only a matter of time before fatigue sets in, and I got to take a break. And I like to be able to do my fretwork from start to finish with as few breaks as possible. So having the work table at the right height is important, and that's based on obviously the height of or the length of the 4x4. And if you're going to make one of these, I would recommend starting out as high as you can go, and then from there you can cut it down to a height that you think is the best. It's pretty hard to start out too low and raise it up. There's really no way you can add to the 4x4. So start out with a little bit higher, bring it down, and eventually you'll get to a height that works the best. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you find this information maybe useful, maybe inspiring for you to build your own setup table. And we'll see you in the next episode of From the Luthier's Workbench.